this is Mike. In this screencast, I'd like to look at the final three stages of the social media planning cycle: implementation, monitoring, and tuning. In particular, I'd like to do so by presenting a very short case study on Barclaycard Ring, a credit card company that leveraged crowdsourcing not just to launch a product and develop it, but to actually manage the product after it was launched to great success. By way of background, Barclaycard Ring was launched by Barclaycard US, the American arm of the 300-year-old bank. Based in Delaware, Barclaycard US co-brand credit cards, so they'll partner with retailers, travel companies, etc., to produce cards that are branded with the company's logo, name, and certain tailored conditions, etc. So it's very much a partnership agreement. In terms of social media usage, Barclaycard US has long been established as one of the leading banks to utilize these tools. Uh, Huge amounts of traffic anyway through their Facebook page and via their Twitter feed. Good use of conversational business model to interact with customers, to provide high standards of service, and to generally keep them informed. So a good collaborative background, lots of use of crowdsourcing from the earliest days of Web 2, suitably incentivized through things like NHL points and so on, reward loyalty schemes of one form or another. So a company with a good history of social media, such as you can have a history in something that's still relatively new. Back in 2011-12, the challenge Barclaycard US faced was how to develop the credit card arm of the company further. In the wake of the global economic downturn, consumer confidence in banks in the US was at an all-time low. And of course, again, a result of the downturn, regulation was at an all-time high, potentially. And this was impacting on the flexibility the company needed to continue to develop its portfolio. So customers and regulators, heavily driven by concerns over the downturn, particularly transparency and what the companies were actually doing, particularly the banks. By April 2012, the company had reached a point where it really needed to continue to stimulate new business while addressing all of those concerns. And at that time, too, because of the downturn yet again, heavily constrained in terms of its available marketing spend. So, how do you continue to develop a business when consumer confidence is at an all-time low, regulation is at an all-time high, and you have limited money to spend on marketing anyway? The solution Barclaycard US came up with was to build on its history of consumer collaboration through social media. Crowdsourcing was used to help the company initially develop a better credit card product. They picked it up through the social media monitoring that they needed a card that would be very flexible, both for the customer and the company. Transparency translated in a need for an easier to understand product in terms of its conditions. And it needed to do so in a way that engendered confidence without massive slick advertising, which it couldn't afford anyway. Now, one way to do this is to invite people to be part of a beta, which is what Barclaycard US did, and to rely on word of mouth. Consumer confidence is at an all-time low. One way to turn that round is to win the trust of some customers and get them to recommend others. And that's essentially how the product that we're going to talk about came about. Crowdsourcing was used to develop the product, which was called Barclaycard Ring. But the unique thing at that time was that this was the first bank to then continue the crowdsourcing activity and give customers a major stake in how the product was managed moving forward. Barclaycard Ring was a member-based card, initially by invitation, then word of mouth, and it used crowdsourcing after the launch to give customers an ongoing say in how terms and conditions were managed. All of the members were given transparency from the very start. So Barclaycard Ring's profit and loss account was regularly updated and publicly available to all those members who logged in. The members were also consulted, and still are, on any key policy changes whatsoever. So it works in two ways. The community itself, the members, can vote on and decide key policy changes, but if any individual member wishes to opt out of the collective decision because of personal circumstances, preferences, they can do so. Now, this is a fantastic way of doing things because it means the customers are very heavily involved. They can vote on key issues. They can still opt out of a decision that they as an individual might be uncomfortable with or might cause some problems. And because of that high level of collaboration and consent, it keeps the regulator happy too. So a very straightforward system and very effective. From the very outset, this was engendered in the agreement itself that members sign. The standard Barclaycard credit agreement was reduced to a mere 6 pages, pretty good for a credit card, with a very understandable plain English 2-page summary of all the key terms and conditions applied at the time as well. So simplicity and transparency, and the idea was to align the product not just to the needs of the company, but the customers too. The way this operated was relatively straightforward. It had a number of unique features. First of all, um, as with many of the other Barclaycard credit card products, there was a proportion of revenues donated to charity. Access to the profit and loss account enabled the company and the customer to manage this effectively together. The interest rate was fixed. Most companies will go for something like $7.99 and all sorts of gimmicks like that. They 7.9%, whatever it may be. Barclaycard Ring operated on a fixed 8%. That's it. 8%, whole number, very straightforward what the interest rate will be, with a late fee capped at $25. So you pay late, it'll never cost you more than $25 in terms of the administration charge. Now, as the product developed and was rolled out and was operating over time, fluctuations are of course necessary to all banking products. But the community were consulted on this. Members had a say. So, for example, it may be the case that late fees needed to come down to be competitive with other cards. So from $25 to $10. The customers had the opportunity to vote for this, but recoup the revenue to 8.25% interest rate. So in other words, lower late fee, but higher interest rate. A decision like that would normally be taken by the card company. In the case of Barclaycard Ring, proposals are put forward and voted on by the membership. So it's the card holders, not the card company, that decide. Equally, however, there may be those who would prefer, because perhaps they never pay late, to maintain the 25%, the $25 fee, but to retain the 8% interest rate rather than 8.25. So there was an opportunity there to opt out if it was simply more personally satisfactory to do so. Now, this is really clever strategy because it suits everyone. The community can decide what's best on aggregate, but individuals, where appropriate, can opt in or out of a decision. And it's all managed by maintenance of fixed margins. So any variations in revenues and profits visible in the P&L would be adjusted accordingly. So it might mean we can give more money to charity, for example, and again, the members decide this. So it's all very participatory, but with the opportunity to opt out. This gave customers and the company flexibility, but it kept the regulators happy too. If you are consulting and in members on changes in terms and conditions, and they voluntarily accept them or opt out of them, that's absolutely fine. And so, in a heavily regulated market, it gave the company the flexibility it needed through participation. So it's crowdsourcing continuing throughout the lifespan of the product. What impact did this have? Well, the outcomes are really impressive. It was very, very positively received by the customers, but also by third-party commentators, traditional press, key influencers on banking blogs, and so on. So great response because it was such a democratic system to operate and very transparent with that visible P&L. Normally, Barclaycard experienced at very best 48% online participation from credit card members. From the very outset, Barclaycard Ring achieved 75% participation. So 3/4 of all its customers managed their accounts online and participated in the decisions. In terms of online payment of credit card statements, that went up too, straight away from 44% average on other products to 51% on Barclaycard Ring. And the number of customers for this product compared to others opting for paperless billing, great operational saving for the company, which could be passed on through the P&L to the customers, well, that went up by over 100%. So all of this led to significant and ongoing improvement in credit card management, not just for the company, but for individual customers too. Barclaycard quickly found that Ring customers were less likely, significantly less likely, to pay late and incur charges or to default on loans. So greater stakeholder input led to more responsible use of the credit cards by customers, which again keeps the regulator happy. And really, it was the first of an innovative series of new credit cards that were much more participatory and set the standard for many cards across the US banking sector. So this really was a disruptive product in terms of how credit cards are managed. The learning points from all of this are that if you let customers be more involved in the decision making of your organization, they will do so in a responsible way and in a way that's profitable for you too. Barclays quickly learned that through Ring, if you let people manage the card system themselves, give them a say in its day-to-day management, then they will manage their own cards more responsibly too, which is more profitable in the long run. So crowdsourcing, normally used to develop new products and services, can be continued after launch and used to manage the product or service itself. So you can continue to develop and refine your product long after launch if the crowdsourcing is left in place. And in the case of Barclaycard Ring, this has had fantastic benefits for the company in terms of not just profitability, but reputation, market share, and all of the other key metrics. So collaboration through social media works really effectively. But all of this only happened because the crowdsourcing continued. And for the crowdsourcing to continue, well, that meant the social media monitoring and interaction, the conversational business model, had to be very, very effective and refined to stay effective. And this led to fine tuning of the product itself so that it always, as far as possible, satisfied not just organizational objectives, but customer needs. And that's the crucial message from Barclaycard Ring. Organizational objectives and customer needs can be aligned through continuing crowdsourcing and effective feedback and response mechanisms. So Barclaycard Ring was a game changer in terms of the management of US credit cards and a lesson for all of us of how you really can leverage those latter stages of the social media planning cycle, implementation, monitoring and fine-tuning to great effect. Thank you.